So it looks like we've got right now, so in the room with me, for everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Nora with the King County Fleet. I've got Yvette with Roads in the room with me, and also Mark Anderson with Transit for the RISC program. So we've got, it looks like we've got Parks. If Parks could confirm that that Bing was able to log on. She had called me this morning.
Yes, good morning. It's Bing right here. And
oh, good, you made it, okay.
We made it, yeah. There's 3 of us here. Don Herrig is here and Nick Halverson as well.
Great, so with King County Parks, and looks like we've also got Mike Berman from KCIT and Joanne from Roads. And I know the Roads Operations Group was going to call in, so hopefully we'll...
yeah, this is Joanne. We have our supervisors in the room.
So this is Tony.
Okay,
I was going to call in, but Joanne set it up for us. So.
Great. Well, I'm glad you're all in. So Elizabeth, go ahead and get started.
Okay, thanks, Nora. So, so today this is Elizabeth Marshall, CEO of MarshallGIS, and I've got with me Terry Bartlett, who's a senior account manager, and Rhett Harmon, GIS management expert. I'm going to be doing a PowerPoint, and then Terry and Rhett are each going to do a couple of demonstrations. And then we have an hour and a half, so we're going to leave some time for questions and answers. And as I mentioned, if you don't have access to the speakerphone, since we are recording this for Nora, just send us a chat and we'll read that question out and answer it too. So that way we get everybody's questions captured. So just a little bit about us. We've been doing GIS, geospatial work for over 22 years before there really was an ESRI program. And we've really focused on integrating geospatial data with business systems like work and asset management, and have a product called GeoConnects that plays with some of the systems that you currently use, such as Lucity and CityWorks, and also Infor and Maximo. And then the last 3 years, we've really focused on creating a very scalable product called LEGO, which is Latin for connect, much like the word Lego. And a partnership with Verizon that lets us do some really interesting things with collecting and disseminating geospatial information. So our target with this LEGO product is really anybody that is managing and divisions that have, folks out in the field working. And that can include utilities, public works, operations and maintenance, social services, building code enforcement. And so it's just a way of getting a better handle on the metrics of your operations. So what we've heard is important is, you need the system to be up, online, intuitive, so a high level of trust and track record. We really are seeing the need to integrate what we're collecting in LEGO over into your GIS and your work and asset management system, so you can, not everybody has to learn a new system. They may just see the data that we are collecting in their own business systems that they use every day. And especially if you're trying to overlay on GIS, accuracy of your data, your locational data is important. And, managers really want simple reports that target a certain management issue that they have, and maybe it just shows up in their email on their phone. So in terms of integration, we've designed LEGO and the data it collects and the data it exposes to play well with GIS, and especially Esri GIS. It doesn't have to be Esri GIS, and also the other business systems that you're using day to day. So I'm going to do a quick tour of the actual user interface that you see when you log into LEGO. So there's a concept of mobile assets. We're calling them vehicles here, but it can really be any asset of value with or without an engine. It can include a cell phone or a tablet as well if you choose to do that, and you can actually identify the driver of each vehicle. And then there's this concept of tracks, and this is just data that we're collecting every day day after day, up to 2 years. And the nice thing about that, so it's designed to be time series data, is you can then go back and do reports of the last year's operations that maybe you didn't think of before, and get reports on the metrics of your operations after the fact. Then there's a really important concept of an event, and an event is a very generally defined thing. It's something really, you can think of it as something that's important to you to understand operations. And that may be, you know, a speeding event in a particular area especially, or maybe usage of vehicles at certain times of the day. But it also can mean that I've turned my sweeper truck brushes are down. And so maybe I want to define an event as when sweeper brushes are down inside of a service area number 1 and get total miles swept, things like that. So this is important because it feeds into work and asset management systems and GIS in a lot of interesting ways. So there's a very simple reporting, really, with a few, not more than a half hour of training. Somebody can learn to spin up their own reports of certain types of events that are important to them. And for example, this is a quick view of an odometer report. This may be of interest if you're using fleet management software and you want to use this automatically recorded odometer data. And you can then set up recurring reports that go to different people or different groups of people on whatever schedule you like. Terry will go into a little bit of how we do that. And of course, there's the concept of geofence, which is just a boundary of an area that is meaningful to you. And you can just digitize these right on the map, or we can bring in, let's say you've got a bunch of service area boundaries or other management boundaries in your GIS. We can use those. And then we can further define what an event of interest to you is. So in this case, this is a park, and we were able to see how we're working in parks by vehicle. There is a maintenance component here, and it allows us to collect data and send triggers based on engine miles or time or, what's the third one? I just forget. Distance?
Hours.
Hours. Engine hours, yeah. So because we want this to work for a variety of different people in different ways, we can, based on your login, just show, and you can actually control this yourselves, which data different logins see and which vehicles they see. And you can also set up these different views, so you can see those people that are managing the greenway here, for example, or those people that are working in operations utilities only, or fire, and that sort of thing. There's the concept of jobs, too, where you can click anywhere on a map or enter an address and see who's closest. I can create a job and then see who's closest, and I can dispatch jobs. And that interoperability really is with any connected device. So any smartphone, there's these new Garmins that we can bundle that are actually an Android application with really nice directions, better than your average Garmin. I've been using this a lot lately, and also it can give you real-time traffic issues and give you alternate routes based on traffic that you have in your city there. So the mobile application looks a little bit like this. The very simple user interface, and you simply start. And the nice thing is it can collect time to that job and time on job, that sort of thing. Just an overview of LEGO. You know, we're using the biggest, largest, most reliable network. You've seen the commercials. So we're using Verizon, the network that Verizon has. And we have a virtual private network where we're collecting and recording the data from the vehicles. Since our last presentation now, we can now actually create hotspots and provide full Wi-Fi coverage in the vehicle, in addition to collecting vehicle diagnostics and other data that you may have on a cell phone or tablet. So there's a lot of flexibility here, and it's growing on what sort of information you can collect in the field. Bring that up, we can collect the GPS, bring that up in the cloud, and then any connected device can see it. So interesting thing too is on some of these devices, these CalAmp series, is we can, you can actually, if you are in a canyon, it'll still collect the GPS data and then map that out once you get back into cell coverage, if you have any holes of cell coverage in your operations. So this is another way to look at the overview of LEGO as a platform as a service. You've probably heard SaaS, software as a service. And we go a little further in that we provide hardware and web service interoperability, so it's a less familiar term called PaaS. But there's two huge areas of value and that are growing that are our focus as a company. One is in the ability to collect a wide variety of sensors and feeding those sensors up in sensor data up into LEGO. And we just won a grant with DSU to create a sensor adapter that will even further streamline how we collect sensor data in a near vehicle and pushing that up into the cloud. And on the other side, assuming that this is the hosted cloud application and data, is being able to expose the data into mission-critical business systems that you use every day, whether that's GIS or Lucidity or CityWorks. And that way, you know, a lot of people may be using LEGO and not actually know it because we're simply populating data in systems they use every day. So on these CalAmp devices, we use CalAmp because they're here in the U.S. and we can also program these devices to do a little bit more for us. We can program these CalAmp GPS devices in the vehicle to not just spit out data every 30 seconds or every minute, but we put push data into the LEGO cloud when something interesting happens. So that we've defined that to be when the vehicle turns a certain angle, goes a certain distance, spends a certain amount of time, or there's a certain event that occurs in the vehicle, like the plow's gone down, the brush is down, idling is excessive. And that way, every point here, which is these little arrows that we shoot up the LEGO, is something different and interesting. And then we don't have to post-process a bunch of the same data up in the cloud. And we don't have a huge data load on the data we're shooting up to the cloud, and which actually keeps our pricing low. And the last benefit there is our tracking is really accurate, especially as we can crank down the angle where we start to detect the next point. So we're able to get these turns really, really well. It's important for GIS stuff, which we'll get into in a minute. Check my time here. Okay, so so if people are using LEGO to get a real-time view of their operations, you know, actual speed, who's got the engine on, who's driving, stuff like that. And you can look and see historically what happened that day. And Terry will show the concept of proof of presence, prove you were there, prove you weren't there. A lot of time is spent doing that in the public sector. And we'll show you how easy that is to do looking back. So to go into events a little bit, because they are important with I mean, that's where I think a lot of the meat of the information is, and the information that we can push out to other systems. So one kind of event is a linear event. So it's pretty fun where we can now actually just show not only where the vehicle went, but also when that vehicle itself is actually working. So this dark black here is where one of the either right broom or left broom was actually down. And so some managers will say, well, I want to see my whole city fill up with track brush down data every month. And, you know, that's their goal, and they can kind of see where they're missing things or, lots of times they're trying to have one person sweep east-west and the other one north-south so that they're getting one whole area at one time. So now you can do that. It can also show, when maybe a boom truck is actually, the boom is engaged, or a Vector truck, the Vector's on. So it's fairly simple wiring to connect up these other triggers on board to tell us what's going on and give us a completely automated look at work. So I can see now for some of the stormwater requirements, I have this report that could possibly automate my whole reporting process, which tells me my total distance and average speed that I've actually swept with no guesswork. So this is a view of one single event. It starts here with the green arrow, and this little checkered arrow is, or not arrow, it's a flag. Checkered flag is where it stopped. That whole time the broom was down. Then there's the concept of point events. And so those can be, in this case, you're looking at buildings that the city has named, and names that are familiar to them. It could be fire hydrants. It could be any kind of point asset, anything of interest to you that's best defined for you as a point. And then we can report like arrival time and departure time at each of these sites. If that represents work, in this case, this is inter-office, intercity mail. Similar application is intercity recycling. Then I actually have a concept for drive time versus work time that I never had before. I can get those metrics and look at my operations in a new way. So now we're actually able to see speeding relative to a database of speed limits. So you can decide I don't care at all, or I want to just know if it's over 10 miles over the speed limit. And those events can be stored. You can see them on the screen, or you can store them, or you can just have it show up on your cell phone. Similarly, like things like idling, we don't start collecting idling until 2 minutes, so we're not collecting every little stoplight. But you can decide that idling over 30 minutes is important to you, and get a report on idling, for example. So here's the Sound Transit. One person wanted to just get a report when somebody was outside their service area. And I can define that event, like this vehicle within the service area between 8 and 5, and just that vehicle is the one that I want to report on. And that's the concept of tags. So Terry will show a little bit of this, like identify the business rule, and then I can just tag that business rule to one vehicle or a group of vehicles. So it's pretty flexible there. Some of the things of interest to fleet management, tracking time, odometer, and engine hours, and exposing that data to fleet management software. I'm going faster here than I'm talking. So last, I'm going to go into reports a little bit, just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that you could see. And, we're continually learning from our customers on new things to do and combine. But the big one is, how are we using vehicles? I check out a vehicle for a week, but am I just using it 6 days out of the month or 19 days out of the month? And what's the number of trips and total miles? And so I'm certain there's people there in King County that know a lot more about this than I do, but this gives you some interesting data to understand. Maybe I can optimize vehicle utilization a little bit more. Maybe I can put off the purchase of a very expensive rig based on the utilization data. So, here we have people that are working in parks. When the vehicles stop, they're actually doing garbage pickup here. So I have a new way of looking at by vehicle what the work time is versus the drive time by park. Or I can slice it and say by vehicle. So there's different ways to get at defining work other than a manually filled out work order. And another is, I guess, the dump zone, and what's the other one? Wash zone is sort of the field equivalent of the water cooler area. So some managers want to keep a cap on how much time is spent in the dump zone. And this manager was able to just create a quick polygon around the dump zone, and he's managing so that not too much time is spent in there. And the time is actually spent sleeping. So this is a sleeper, and then they dump their dirt sleep. And here, so for example, how much time is being spent at each office. This could just also be, garbage pickup within parks or other point assets. This comes from the points of interest. And I get total duration stopped at each of these sites. You can make a positive eco report out of this sort of thing and say, give awards to people that have the highest eco report score. And so that could be a combination. You can define it, but it could be a combination of things like harsh deceleration, acceleration, harsh cornering right and left, speeding, and things like that you define as a safer eco driving. So now I'm going to switch over to some of the things that MarshallGIS has been doing for a lot of years. Is how can we take LEGO and make it useful in other systems? So we're collecting a lot of data here, and typically up to 2 years, but some customers ask us to delete it sooner and some want it a little longer. But essentially we're collecting all this data, and then a component of it can be pushed off, and that'll show how we've integrated with Lucity, so you can see, say, Lucity or CityWorks work orders with your vehicles on some of the vehicles, and then some of the data, represented by the skinny arrow, could actually just show up as a new populated field, say, for a work order. Actually, it could be a complete closed work order in the case of I think in King County you're tracking plow down as work in CityWorks, so that can be automated. So what we've done is created a web service, as I mentioned, in LEGO, where we expose this data and then can grab the data and populate in these different systems. So I'm going to get a little technical, but this is the stuff that's sort of cutting edge, I think. In terms of what is that useful information. And typically as customers use this, they start giving us even more ideas on what's useful in other systems. But one is the concept of readings. And this is just minimally processed data that you then manage with your own triggers and filters in your business system like CityWorks or Lucity. And a good example of that is odometer. So we may just push odometer into another system that you're using, and then you use your own triggers that spin off a work order saying, okay, it's 3,000 miles, I got a work order to change the oil on 5 of these vehicles this month. All automated. The other is what I call geographic elements. So that's points and boundaries and lines that have data associated with them, like the sweeper is down on this line. And I can then push that data into EsriGIS, or really anything that's using open layers as well. So that can show up as a GIS feature in your GIS, or it can be a change of condition of existing GIS features like your linear road network that you're using. We can actually change the condition of those features. Or it can just be the vehicles running around on your map. We can use the GeoEvent processor if you purchased it. We don't need to use the GeoEvent processor, though. We can give you a feed that can work on any ArcGIS map without the GeoEvent processor, which is an Esri product. Another is a little out there, the concept of units of accomplishment. That's a term that CityWorks uses, and really it's just a term for a work or service request or an inspection or some unit of work that's been done out there in the field. And we can capture those as jobs, and we can route a number of jobs and automatically calculate time to job and time at job. And so why this is important is I can take a job and automatically create an open or closed or modified work order in, say, CityWorks. I can do a similar thing with these points of interest that I showed you and events associated with them. And those can be automated into the business system you're using. And then again, like the sweeper down, engine on, other data on onboard systems, and that means other systems that are running on your truck. I can track those and have those show as a GIS feature, or I can actually show them as work done in my business system. Like similarly with engine diagnostics, anything that you can see about your engine is data we have access to and can push to systems that you may want to use for their superior analysis tools. So that's a dip into what kinds of data we can push over to other systems and why they might be useful. A simple application is just putting your vehicles on, say, your GIS operational map that you're using now, and Rhett will show this with Lucity. Really easy, really click of a button to bring in these vehicles into any ArcGIS server map or ArcGIS online map that you're using, and then you can see these vehicles and data about the vehicles relative to your ArcGIS layers that many of you are using day in and day out. And then I can see then all my work orders. Here's for hydrants, for example, but associated with an asset in my GIS and exactly where my vehicles are. That's a real simple first step to do and gives you a new view into ops. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Terry Bartlett. And he's going to give you a demonstration of LEGO.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. So I'm just going to do just an overview of some of the data that Elizabeth highlighted in the PowerPoint and accessing it through the LEGO application. It's a application that's accessible from anywhere. It's a hosted application, so all you need is a connection somehow to the outside world through the www, and that can be a smartphone, a laptop, a tablet, or a desktop, and just through a secure login that we have. And so you can see here, should be able to see here on the screen a map, and that's this is our basic view of initial startup view of LEGO. All these screens can be customized, and when I get down the road here, I'll show that a little bit to your preferences. But we're looking at live vehicles here on the map. So the first thing we'll talk about is looking at your live operations. In this particular case, this is Sound Transit vehicles. They're using LEGO right now, and so we can see a number of vehicles that are running around the Seattle metro area there. These larger circles with numbers in there, this 34 indicates there's 34 vehicles within this particular area. If I zoom in, it starts to break it up, and we can see some of those vehicles. But as we zoom out, it doesn't overlay those. It just gives you a number to show there's a lot of vehicles in that particular area. Over here on the right, we have a vehicle pane, and we have a number of vehicles listed here. These little symbols, the green symbol here indicates that these vehicles are online and operating. The red symbol indicates that these are offline vehicles right now. So we can see these little tails here. We can turn those on and off. That just sort of shows direction and that these vehicles are on the move. So I'm going to choose one of those. Let's see if we can pick up 258 here. I am going to, I'm right-clicking. You can't see that on my mouse. I am going to zoom to street level. Let's zoom back out here. Oops. Well, let's pick another vehicle then. So we've chosen vehicle 105, and we can go here and take another. So this is sort of a live view. We can also go here to what's called Street View, and sort of see an overview of where they are. So this upper map shows a top-level view of where they are. Looks like they're right next to the BMW store there, and then this bottom one sort of shows their view from looking out their windshield. We can see it's on the move. When it moves, it changes the top screen and the bottom screen. So that's sort of a live view of your operations. And for many managers that are dispatching, that are especially in winter operations, it's a useful tool to see where your crews are, or if you want to have some field staff that you want to find that have specific tools or something like that, but see where in real time where your field staff is and what they may be working on is really a useful tool. The other thing we can do is we can take this 192, I guess we're looking at 105, and we can see where 105 has been today, that crew's been today. So I can draw out today's tracks. So we can see where this vehicle has been today. It's been up and down the, looks like the I-5 corridor there a little bit. That just shows its daily track for that particular vehicle. The other thing I was going to show here on this data set is something specific to Sound Transit is we have some customers in Sound Transit, being one of those, is tracking vehicles, tracking by driver as well. It's called driver ID. So they can get a report of trips, daily trips by driver. We can see here we have the vehicle name. This is when the trip started and completed, how long the trip took, duration of the trip, the vehicle name, and then the driver. So they have a number of drivers that share vehicles, and they just have chosen to use this capability. So they have a little login or a little RFID tag that they used when they get into the vehicle, so they could track which driver was driving that particular vehicle. Some other reports I'll show here is an odometer report. So this is one of their reports that they have. They have a number of reports, which we'll take a look at some of those. But this is just a sort of a snapshot of their odometer reading. This is by a daily. We can choose these reports by daily, weekly, or monthly, or some sort of custom one. And then we can choose the tags that we wanted to show there. The other report that they have at Sound Transit that they track is geofence violations. So they have a geofence set up, and that geofence is their district boundary. So that shows the district boundary of their vehicles. Then they have this report so they can link to that and show where those violations were. So we have this violation, which was on the, let's see here, what's the date, 118. Vehicle 072, I can select that link. I can go over here to my map and then show where they left. So this little green flag indicates they left the boundary, and they were over here for 23 minutes, and then they returned back here to within the district. If we really wanted to go take a look and see where they went, we could zoom in here, and we can turn on our satellite image and zoom in and show that they were in this parking lot for 23 minutes. That's just showing sort of that concept of being able to track not only inside of a geofence, but also track outside violations of a geofence. I'm going to go over here to a different data set here and look at some other capabilities. So this is another set of data here in the Boise area, and we can see we have a number of vehicles. Some are on the move, some are stopped once again. And I can, once again, the other thing we can look at is, besides showing the daily, today's at tracks, we can go back here and do a query of in my historically. So we store out in the cloud 2 years worth of data. So if I go here to my little track tab down here and query tool, I can go back to, as far as I have data, in this particular database, we have up to, I think, a year and a half or almost 2 years of data. I'm going to go back to January 1st, 2015, hit my query tool, select a vehicle there, and so now I can scroll down here and see all the way back to January of 2015. And this historical data gives us a pretty good feel for what these crews are doing on a daily basis. So we can see that they start their day at about 9:30 every morning, somewhere in there, between 9 and 9:30, and they stop their day somewhere around 12:30, 1 o'clock, pretty much every day, and how many miles that they drove. So this is really a snapshot of this crew's activities on a yearly basis, and we can look for, in a visual sense, we can look for abnormalities from these historical data. We could set up a number of events or queries in events. We'll go more into events in a minute, or business rules to report out any abnormalities as well. We'll look at some of those here in a minute in the sense of other things like harsh driving and speeding events and those kinds of things. So I can choose any one of these days. I'm just going to pick the 16th of October, select that particular date. I can go ahead and draw that track for this particular crew. And then we can see that it, where it went for this particular day. These circles indicate with the minutes the times that they stopped. So in this case, we're tracking times that this particular vehicle stopped. If we weren't quite sure, we wanted to see a sort of a specific about, which way the vehicle is going. In this case, it's a pretty circular track, but a lot of the tracks are back and forth and over themselves, so it's not really clear. We have a little replay tool that we can go in here and replay their day. So we can just replay, and then it's, once again, another tool for an operations manager to see what their field staff are doing and how they're operating and what routes they're taking, and maybe an opportunity to improve routes. Lots of times we see vehicles going back to the yard or to the office many times. So an operations manager may ask, why do we go back and forth 2 or 3 times, which obviously uses time and gas and vehicle usage. So it's just another way to look at, from a historical perspective, looking at that historical data. We could set up, as Elizabeth talked about, points of interest, and those are just known locations that we have. In this case, we have building locations, but these could be assets, they could be hydrants or signs or any other kinds of, locational type things. And then we can go ahead and track time when your field staff visit these locations. So you would get a report. There's a couple ways to look at this, slice and dice the data, but this is a simple report showing productivity for this particular vehicle on the 2nd, which I guess was yesterday. And they, once again, started their day about 9:30, and then they were at this fire station number 1 at 9:37, and they left there at 9:39. They were there for a minute. And then they went to the city rec office. They arrived there at 9:40, left at 9:41, so on and so forth for the rest of the day. And then you get it. So this is sort of what this vehicle did yesterday, or what this crew did yesterday. It sort of just maps out what accomplishments and what places that they visited, at least from a standpoint of known locations. We can also report out those stops that were unknown locations as well. And I don't have that in this particular report, but it would be a similar type report of showing stops at unknown locations. You might take a look at those and see what times they were spending in those as well. The other thing we can do, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my points of interest here. The other way that Elizabeth talked about is using, once again, geofences. And so we're going to go take a look at some parks geofences. I'm going to turn on my city parks. So these parks could be entered in through, if you have them in your ArcGIS or GIS system, or you can go ahead and can enter these. Let's turn this back off there. Sorry. Or you can go ahead and hand enter the geofences. I'm going to sweep that clean so we can take a look at that. So these are all the city parks, and so now this is the city of Boise, and before this, the Parks Department really didn't have any metrics to measure how much time each crew is spending in each park. So we've entered in all their city parks, and now we can print out a report showing each day where each one of these crews spent their time. So in this particular case, this particular crew spent some time in Morris Hill Cemetery, Fairmount Park, Bora Pool, Morris Hill Cemetery. And once again, the data here can be sliced and diced if you want to sort of summarize by how much time on a week or a month basis that all your crews spend in Winstead Park. You could get a report for that as well.
I just want to add something here, Terry. There was a question by Doug about a question that came in from Doug about whether or not you could determine who is in a geofence and shifts. So this right here can accomplish that. So by going in, these are parks, but these are geofences. So you can have who was in that geofence at a certain shift and how much time they spent in that.
And the shift would be defined by time, maybe that's 8 to 5. So
Yeah.
you could have it report out by shift, or employee, or, by park.
Yeah, so all these events these are really events that are set up, and maybe go take a quick look at that. And they're really business, these events we're talking about are really business rules. So you define what those business rules are. So if you want to define a business rule that is by shift, then you can create a new event here, and you set up these queries within these event rules, and so you can add as many event rules as you want to. In this case, we have a couple events set up inside the parks and outside the parks boundaries, and a number of other speedings and zone locations. But you can create really an unlimited amount of business rules, and it can get really detailed. You can get as detailed as you want to of defining what your rules are and what you want to start tracking and then reporting on. One of the things here we have is another way to take a look at an event. Let me turn off my geofences here, is we can go look at reports or events from this particular standpoint. And I am going to choose pick a particular day where I know I have some events going on here. Just scroll over here to the second.
Yeah, you might explain those little dots that you see there. They just are a visual telling you that some sort of event occurred at that time. So it's a quick way of seeing where events occurred in history.
Yeah, so we have some speeding events, which we can see here. I'm selecting. So on this particular day, we can see some speeding events up here. You can sort of report these in a report, or you can display events up on a screen, and those are defined in the event rule itself and how you want to display these types of activities. And you can also, if it's a really important event, you could set up a text as well and have somebody be texted about a specific alert or some sort of event as well. And once again, that's defined in the event rule itself. We have some idling events, showing the different idling events that are going on. So in this particular case, they're just displaying up there, and you can make those show up while they're happening and then close, and there's a number of different ways to explore or to define those events. The other thing we can do, which is a really important tool, is the ability to do a proof of presence. So every organization gets a number of customer service requests or about street sweeping. Somebody didn't sweep my street, or one of your county vehicles hit my vehicle at this particular time and location. And those are really hard to respond to. Sometimes we hear lots from a lot of customers about being on a, we see a county or city vehicle at the restaurant for 3 or 4 hours every day. So we have a tool, it's called Proof of Presence tool, and we can just go ahead and select a particular area here, and we can choose a date. We can actually get down to the actual hours if we want to. In this particular case, I'm just going to pick a day and just see if there was any of my vehicles in that area. And I didn't get one, so let's open up. Oh, I got one right here. So we can see that this particular vehicle was in there, entered into this area at 10:38 on the 3rd and left there at 10:39. And then we can go ahead and draw that track. And we can see what went through there. We can actually get down to the individual track point and see the speed that they were going. And we can look at track points over here as we move along and look at the time and speed that they were going. So if somebody says that they were speeding through that area, you can go through and take a look and see that they were actually going within the speed limits and show the times that they were at that particular location. So here's another example of a report. This is just, once again, the vehicle utilization report to look at which vehicles are being used quite a bit. I'm going to go take a look at some linear events over here. And so linear events are particularly difficult to track in any type of way, whether it's finger or in some work order system. And I think we've talked to the road services group a bunch about this, is trying to track every street that you might have plowed or street that you might have swept or spread different types of materials on there, or if you're spraying for mosquitoes, all those kinds of linear type activities are really hard to track. This is really a great system to capture those. So here's showing some sweeping events down here for this particular vehicle. We can also look at reports for sweeping. And then we also have some geofences that Elizabeth showed earlier. And so we have the dump zone. This particular customer, the operations manager, I guess is would say is not real computer savvy, and so he really wants to get reports and track time of his folks that are in the dump zone and wash zone. So he wants to keep his staff in the dump zone only for an hour a day. That's his goal. That's his metric goal. So he wanted a way to track that. So we created a geofence around the dump zone and the wash zones, and then we can go and report those. Sorry, wrong tab there. So he gets a number of reports emailed to him every day. So these are the times in the wash zones, dump zone report. He gets an idling report. So he gets these reports emailed to him at about 4 o'clock every morning of the day's previous activities. So he can just open up these reports, take a look at them, and you can see this is from 12/23, and this stand was in the dump zone 3 times that day, shows the duration of each stop that he was in there, and his total time in the dump zone, 18 minutes. Ken was in there for 31. Jerry was in there for 40. So we can see that, we can quickly see that all of his, how many times they visited the dump zone, and that they're all under an hour, so he's pretty happy with that. He's just going to sort of move on with his day, maybe look at his other reports. So these are looking from, once again, events, looking for exceptions. Really, managers mostly manage by exceptions, something out of the ordinary. If everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, they're pretty happy with that. The other reports that he looks at are, he gets, for his reporting purposes, of miles swept per vehicle per selected period. In this particular case, it's a month. So every jurisdiction across the U.S. has a nice sweeping plan, typically in a map format, where they show, or some of them are in an Excel spreadsheet showing every street and what they're planning on sweeping. But hardly anybody is really tracking what's been swept, which I said is a very difficult thing to track. So this report shows From a monthly standpoint for Jerry, he swept a total of 27.2 miles, miles of streets at an average speed of 3.9 miles. And we can look at these individual, that's a summation of all these individual events. So we're tracking broom down and broom up kinds of events. The same thing for plow down, plow up, or it could be any type of sensor that we could be tracking. And we can once again hit this little arrow over here and get go to my map view. This just shows where the broom went down here at the green arrow, and then where the broom went up here at the checkered flag. So all those individual events are being summarized in that monthly report. Last thing I'm going to show is just this concept of jobs. So I'm going to zoom out here a little bit and choose a new view. So one thing I didn't really talk about yet is you can create these tags, which are a group of user types, and then you can have different views of your data. I did talk about being able to customize your interface. So if I didn't like my points of interest over here, I can drag it over here and go ahead and these are different workspaces, so that I could just save this. I'm not going to go ahead and save it, but I could save it or save it as Terry's workspace. And then next time I log in, my points of interest tab will be over there. So we have some users that don't really have a map interface. They have the dispatch interface. And so you can just sort of customize these interfaces and then save them out as your own individual view of the world, so to speak. In this particular case, I'm going to go ahead here and just, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to go ahead and just use my mouse and right-click, create a new job here. I could have typed in the location if it was an address, a specific address. And then I'm going to pick today's date, and I'm going to type in a note, inspect building, and then I'm going to go ahead. I can either find my nearest available crew or nearest without jobs. I'm just going to go ahead and pick myself, and I'm just going to go ahead and dispatch this to myself. And we have a mobile application that is a simpler view of the world, so to speak. Just showed up. I have a new job that just showed up in my dispatch view here. So I can just, this is a mobile application that can be run on a smartphone or a tablet, connected smartphone or tablet. That's a simpler view. You can just show alerts or vehicles or traffic kinds of information. So especially for supervisors that are out there that want to keep track of where their crews are in case they want to make a change. There's an emergency change. They have to dispatch somebody. Or people can, staff can get these jobs sent out to them through the dispatch module in the LEGO application. In this case, this is my job that just showed up here, and you can see it sort of blinking to show that that's new. I can go ahead and start this job. And as soon as I hit yes, it's starting to track time on that job and any trips that I'm taking to that particular job. And I can go ahead, if I want to route myself to that job, then it will route me and show me my times, and this is just using Google Maps here. I think Elizabeth mentioned we support Garmin, so if you have a Garmin, you could use the Garmin to route yourself as well and receive jobs in chat as well. And if I go back over here, then I can get a report showing all my completed jobs. So we can see here when the repair jobs, the location, when it was started, was completed. So there's a number of ways to track time, whether it be points of interest or geofences or jobs. So there's a variety of ways to track activities, work activities, and what your field staff are doing during the day. I am going to now turn it over to Rhett to show some of the integration to some of the other business systems.
All right, thanks, Terry. Just going to share my desktop here, and so be covering a number of integration topics here. The first one that I'm going to be showing is ESRI maps within the LEGO application. So Terry was demonstrating the maps that you saw in his were Google Maps, but you may have your own specific layers by specific groups that you want to see. So, for example, parks may want to see their parks, or the transportation group might want to see their structures and their assets in the map application. So with LEGO, you can add your specific maps. For example, if you have ArcGIS and you have map services, those could be on the technical side, either ArcGIS Server or ArcGIS Online. We can bring those maps into LEGO. So when you choose ArcGIS, you can then essentially mash up a variety of ESRI or other GIS formats into one map. So here I have some, this is coming from ArcGIS Online. I also have some ArcGIS Server maps here in the Portland area, which have, for example, parks. As I zoom into the map, you may have your own scale dependencies where you want certain things to come on as you're zooming in. So, for example, maybe zoning or your district boundaries or parcels and so forth can show up with your own labels. So, again, we can work with your ESRI layers and based on the variety of groups that you have and display those within the LEGO application and also, obviously, the vehicles. So that's one thing that I'm going to show in terms of bringing data into LEGO. If you're using LEGO as your primary application, you may want to bring data out of LEGO into other applications that you have. So you might have your own operations map. You may have data that you want to expose in ESRI. So those could be real-time data, being, for example, real-time vehicle locations. So this is bringing out data from LEGO into ArcGIS Online. These are live vehicles. These could be coming into this sort of application, or you may have your own sort of operations map where you're wanting to bring those in. That's maybe a specific application, maybe a snow application that you want to bring live vehicles in. So, or street sweeping or parks. So again, if you have your own ESRI sort of format or application, we can bring that data in. We have an ESRI service that we provide, real easy to set up and get that data into your existing applications. Also, we can provide you historic information. So historic data may be the track. So that could be where you actually swept or where you actually plowed. So this is Beaverton, for example, and these are actual where they swept within the ESRI ArcGIS Online. So we can collect data. This is actually showing average speed, but it could be other information that's captured, the amount of volume or those sort of things of the data. So again, we're capturing this and we have the capability of bringing that data out to maybe do more analysis in your, for example, ArcMap or other tools that you're using at the county. So that's kind of a secondary LEGO to ESRI. And then the third is into your business systems, which is the next step here. So the county, I know, has CityWorks and Lucity, and I'm sure you have other systems. So we provide a LEGO web service where we expose the data, and this was one of the questions that someone had. Can we provide all of the data and expose that data out to, say, CityWorks or Lucity or other application? The answer to that question is yes. We provide that data out to these other business systems, and it can be real-time data. It can be also data that you're wanting to. So in other words, vehicles within the interface, or it could be other data that you want. Such as odometer or miles, hours, etc. So this is within CityWorks application. This is a service request, and you may be someone that's doing, for example, dispatching, and you want to be able to see those vehicles, and this is your primary application that you're working in. So you're wanting to see, for example, where this service request is as it relates to the vehicle locations to dispatch that. So again, this is just another feed that's coming in that we can provide you on the vehicle side. But we could get other information, perhaps, labor, again, if we're capturing maybe the person's time or odometer or other information as well. Same thing with CityWorks, Lucity. So you can expose that data to Lucity or business system as well. And both of these are partners that we work with. So we've been a partner since 2007, for example, with Lucity. And we have mobile products that already integrate with that and back-end systems that integrate with these systems. So got a long record history of it working with these business systems. So that's it on. I just wanted to show some of the integration here with these systems, and I'm going to pass it back to Elizabeth here.
Okay.
I think you got to share.
Yeah, hang on a second. Where is it? There it is. Share my screen. So, so I have a couple questions that we'll answer. To summarize, we've got a nice UI. I've gotten great feedback from customers on just using the application, but integrating from the field to LEGO and from LEGO to your business systems, I think, let you see operations in a way you couldn't see before. You can see changing conditions, and this concept of auto-populating your business systems has a huge value. Like the last view that Rhett was showing. So if somebody finishes a Lucity work order up in the northeast part of the county or southeast part of the county, and you have a couple lower priority maintenance work orders to do down that way anyway, you can quickly see all that and have them pick those up while they're down there. There's a lot of value to being able to do that. I think what I'll do now is switch over to some of the questions. So there was a question from Doug that was asking, stating that Wi-Fi and radio in the service area can be intermittent, and would our system be subject to some of these issues? And so the couple things, for example, here in Boise, if you were to drive 2 hours up to McCall, you go into a canyon and you're in that canyon for maybe 5 or 10 miles. And so what you see on LEGO when you do that is you go into this canyon, you lose cell coverage, and the vehicle goes off the map. And then you see it pop out of the canyon, and the vehicle comes back on the map, and it actually will fill in the whole track in between, because even though it lost the cell coverage, it was still recording location and onboard system data. So that's the store forward kind of view. So if there is a cell, we are using Verizon, which is one of the better, I think it's the best in terms of coverage, but if you do lose that cell, you're still collecting data. And then just as a secondary note, maybe of interest, there's different flavors of GPS devices. The CalAmps we're using that hook into the vehicle, with the exception of the Wi-Fi hotspot device, that can be CDMA too. We can use a flavor of cell connection called CDMA. It has a lower frequency, and it tends to go through buildings and structures much better than some of the other, say, LTE variety of cell connection. And I'm happy to talk to you further offline on that. So that's how we can handle pretty well when we lose the cell coverage. There was another question on the services and if exposed, how do you use that in something like CityWorks. So just to follow up a little on what Red already said is, there's a REST API where we expose the data, and then there's an on-premise application. It's essentially a GeoConnect. It's what we used with our GeoConnect product line called GeoConnect Server. It's on-premise, your premise, and it acts as a traffic cop of pushing data safely through the APIs and also into GIS, so that you can use that data. And one of the reasons we've gone a little beyond just the GeoEvent processor is when we've got that catching geographic data on your premise with this tool, we can then do a little additional post-processing of the data to be, exactly what you want. Along those lines, you can do additional development, if you like, on that data. So we're not forcing you to use a specific geodatabase format or anything like that.
Hey, Elizabeth, this is Mike Berman.
Yeah. Hi.
So my question was more around the, my question was about the amount, or if all the data is being exposed for bringing it into, say, a CityWorks application via some additional programming or interface on the CityWorks side, or is some of it not being exposed?
Well, right now we're exposing that stuff that people have said is going to be useful. And so you remember those couple of slides where I was saying what kind of information have we heard so far that can be useful in other systems? And that's the data that we're exposing.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
Okay, yeah. And then, it's best practices to use the API that your vendor has, like CityWorks or Lucity's API, to safely push the data through their API. And that's done with this GeoConnect server on-premise tool. There's that's the web app question. And then, can the system monitor any type of vehicle, i.e., I think it says coaches, light rail vehicles, etc. So yeah, typically we can actually bring in a wide variety of sensors that you may have in other vehicles already, and we can pull those in as additional feeds into LEGO. Alternatively, if you have another system that also has GPS feeds, and somebody mentioned this when I was on site last week, if they can expose their feeds, and it's only so complicated you can get with X, Y, and Z. If they can expose those feeds to us through a web service, then we can pull that and show that on LEGO as well. So there's a couple ways to slice that.
And we can also track things that don't have engines or batteries, such as trailers or other assets. So we have devices that you can attach that can track things that are non-electric, you might say, that you want to be able to track those.
Yeah, we're tracking four-wheelers right now and all kinds of things. So yeah, there is a battery-operated tracker as well. And Rhett, do you have any more questions that you're saying?
Well, I just want to make sure we got. Another question just came in. It said, "Can LEGO know if there are passengers on a bus, and if so, how many?"
Yeah, so if we did that, you'd be using, example with Garmin. So right now we're not focused a lot on many passengers on a bus applications, but the Garmin does have the ability to be able to read NFC and RFID. So if, say, the passengers, like in the school bus scenario, have those devices, then they can be read by, right now, with that Garmin device, for example, can read NFC. So probably need to talk with that person in a little bit more detail on what you're looking for. I know that I talked to somebody last week who said they already had a bus management system. But I'm happy to follow up on that. Is there another question?
Parks has 4 questions, so.
Okay, why don't you read the question?
Well, they didn't post the questions, so.
Oh, okay.
They just said they have 4 questions.
I wasn't quick enough to type. So this is Bing from Parks. One of the things we like to track is the amount of acreage that we mow. So is that something you could see being documented in this system?
Yeah, so you can do that by, much like the four-wheeler scenario, and it can be, if you can wire into the power, then the GPS stays powered from that actual vehicle. Otherwise, that's not possible. It's a battery-operated GPS, and you can actually then see tracks on the mowers specifically. So you could see the track on the vehicle stop, and then you could see the track on the mower come off that vehicle and do the park. And then you'd have total the total amount mowed within a park or within a boundary.
It can report on acreage or mileage. We have trail maintenance as well that is collected for miles of trails maintained. And does it have the ability to convert that information perhaps to back and forth, like even though it's 10 miles of trail and it's 10 feet wide, can it convert that to acreage or square footage, whatever we need for reporting purposes?
Yeah, so a way you could do that, let's say, these different mowers, I'm imagining, have different widths that they can cut when they're going along. So you could just say a certain, Terry wants to show something here. Do I need to do something?
Here, I'll
Okay. So let's say then you saw those plow down graphics we were showing. What you could have is for that particular vehicle, which is a mower in this case, that line represents a 10-foot wide swath. So you could then create acreage based on vehicle type, right? So when I see a mower down on that mower, on that linear segment that I am capturing, I could actually just have a condition that shows it's 10 feet wide, and that way you can get acreage or square footage or whatever you wanted there.
Yeah, we're just storing the data in a SQL database, so you can do any calculations and reporting on it that you would like. We don't have an off-the-shelf report that reports that, but we can easily create one.
Yeah, so that's in essence just another report you'd create where everywhere that line is, it's actually a swath of data.
Okay.
Matter of fact, interestingly enough, too, you can show these linear features, and I don't know if you can do it real quick, Terry, but you can actually create a geofence quickly with a buffer, and so and show the total acreage actually mowed. You could do that too. So there's a ability to create a route geofence, which would essentially give you that area of a. So there you go. That's a big fat geofence. So you probably wouldn't do a swath quite that wide, but yeah. So that's one way. Another way to do it. A couple ways to do it.
There it is. Sorry.
There we go. That's a little.
So second question, are you ready for that?
Yep.
Yeah, so second question, also we have our staff share use of the same vehicles, so sometimes the driver changes, along the way. So does each driver log in then? Is there a basic practice where they log in and then they log off when they switch out? Or is there a reader, a sensor which picks up the closest smartphone or Garmin to the tracker? How does that work?
So there's a real quick way to do that. An inexpensive way to do that is what Sound Transit's doing. They use driver ID. It's just a little fob, and when they go into the car, they scan the fob and able to start the car. And there's different things you can do. You can make an irritating noise in the car until they scan their fob. Some people say, can't start the car until I scan the fob, although I think that might be a little dangerous if they're trying to get the heck out of somewhere and they lost the fob. But so and then you can see the vehicle driving around with the driver ID. And I don't know, we could show that here in a second too. But yeah, that's real simple to do.
Okay, next question. what kind of statistical, like metric improvements are you aware of that's consistent with all of your users? Like, is there a record of travel time being cut down? What kind of improvements have your users identified as a result of using the system?
Yeah, well, I got we got lots of stories. Maybe could write almost a book on it. But when we first went live with Boise, they've got signs all over the city that says, Mayor says, don't idle, please don't idle. Well, they were idling all over the place. And so the second day, we sent them a report, a productivity report that shows total idle time. By the way, anyway. And the next day, their idling went from quite a lot to nothing, meaning nothing significant, nothing over 5 minutes. So that's one. Another is, sometimes just things aren't happening like you think they're happening. Even when people are convinced operations are good, there's a couple phases. Well, the first phase that you often can see is the oh my gosh phase, and that's where you can easily get a return on investment, say with Boise on day one or within the month easily. And that's just some real big things that are out there, like, people aren't where they thought they were, they're not in the work area they thought they were. There's a huge safety aspect too, where, we saw this with, like, my daughter, who was a guinea pig when she T-boned a car. You can get that fast deceleration report immediately to your phone, for example. And then you can go in and reconstruct the accident. And in just this one little case, we were able to prove that she didn't speed into the intersection, she decelerated at the right time, and the speed limit was appropriate. And we were able to reduce the insurance cost to us. So if you push that out towards an area of the size of King County, just the savings of insurance and risk management is significant. You could easily pay for the system that way. Matter of fact, we work with insurers that can reduce insurance enough to pay for legal entirely outright. And another is just
routing with Boise one.
Routing. Yeah, you can see that you could actually optimize routing. So those little jobs that Terry showed, there's a route optimization. And so you can route, and we were able to cut the time that it took to get that mail route down in half. So these are huge numbers that we see out there in terms of productivity.
Yeah, I'll just add too, I handle support, so I get calls periodically so I've had a number of calls from different customers saying, is this car, were they really sitting there for 2.5, 3 hours? And I said, yes, they were sitting there for 2.5, 3 hours. They just have to verify, is that really what it's telling them? And, then we go in and we look at it, and sure enough, yes, they were sitting there for 2.5, 3 hours, and that's a number of cases that I've had call in where one of their employees was just...
You get those exceptions, and like any management, you got to deal with exceptions. There's also just, looking at windshield time versus work time. That's a real clear metric. Naturally, a lot of people would prefer to drive than to be working, so, you can look at those ratios and start to make them, set some goals and some awards for not having excessive windshield time. In some industries, it's called holiday time, just to give you a feel for it. Yeah. In the garbage. Yeah.
Last question.
Okay.
So we have Lucity, and I'm curious, how many Lucity user groups do you have, particularly in the Northwest?
We've got a couple customers. I think people are sort of walking before they're running. So the first step is just seeing vehicles in Lucity operational map. But some that come to mind are Clean Water's Lucity, right? Clean Water Services.
Clean Water. We have Kirkland just switched over to, they were Infor, now they're Lucity. Beaverton is actually CityWorks.
Oh, there's CityWorks. About Redmond.
Redmond is Lucity. Trying to think who else in the northwest area.
But we are thinking of starting, as part of the conferences that these partners have, having sort of workshops before or after those conferences so that we get a group of people talking. We can do that with webinars as well. That's just a Lucity group of LEGO users to start creating that exchange of information. And we do have that Red has just gone live with Customer Support Portal, where it's a good idea. We should break some of those out, the discussions by asset management type.
Yeah, because we do have quite a few Lucity customers. They're spread out across the country. So we have some in Arkansas and some in just different areas around the country. But Elizabeth mentioned a few kind of in the northwest area.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for your time. Any other questions just by voice? We've got a few minutes left here.
Let me see if there might be.
Do you have any?
No.
Elizabeth, this is Nora.
Hi, Nora.
Hi. So I think that if there are no more questions, I'll just give a little wrap-up of what's happening next from Fleet's perspective, and then we can sign off. So for those left on the phone, I'm Nora, and I'm with Fleet Administration, and so the next step is for us to send the link out of this presentation so you can share it with other groups that you that may be interested, other people in your department or division. And then from there, we're going to facilitate some conversations about what this means for King County's non-revenue fleet and what do we need versus what do we want, et cetera. So we're going to facilitate some conversations. At this point, we're still in the initial exploratory phase, but it's something that our customers, which are you, are very interested in, and as well as some of the other fleets, including transit and the airport and solid waste division. So we're looking at it as a holistic thing. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email or give me a call, but expect an email in the next few days with the link to this presentation and then also a copy of their PowerPoint. So that's all I've got. Any questions for me? No?
We have one other question about cost range, Nora. I can just address that real quickly, and it really depends on volume of vehicles, but generally we're comparable with the other vendors out there. You know, it starts out worst case, one vehicle, $1 a day per month, but if you're doing volume, it can get down to sub $20 per month per vehicle.
Sorry,
so,
it cut out a little bit, Elizabeth. Can you repeat that for me?
Yeah, if it's a high volume of vehicles, it can easily get well below $20 per month per vehicle, just as, you know, ballpark numbers. And that's where that return on investment pays for itself, because it's just not that expensive relative to the cost of people and vehicles and everything else. So that gives someone had asked about ballpark costs, and that's including so we keep ownership of the devices, so you don't have to buy those. And, of course, we provide the connectivity through Verizon. You can do Wi-Fi hotspots, then it's going to go up a little bit, but we're just tracking. It's pretty inexpensive.
So is that a maintenance service type of cost, and are there implementation or, you know, connectivity costs aside from that, startup costs?
Yeah, no other connectivity costs. It includes the Verizon, the cell phone connectivity, right? But there is a setup, and the setup it depends on what kind of tracker you're using, but it's somewhere, I'm just going to throw out in the $100 range to set up. But our setup includes, you know, naming the vehicles the way you like, collecting the data, and then we provide a ton of training, and we provide that for free. So we want our customers to be very comfortable with the software. So that's all included with the setup.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Elizabeth and team, for doing a second webinar for us. It's been really helpful, and I think the link for the recording will be even more helpful for those who can't attend. So we'll look forward to seeing that and maybe just comparing the two links together. And then I will follow up with you and MarshallGIS soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And yeah, we'll shoot it out on YouTube when it's ready. We'll give that to you, Nora.
Okay, great. Well, have a great rest of your week, and thank you very much.
All right. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye.